What's up, everybody? Welcome. How do I sound? We got Lucky here. What's up, Lucky? What's up, Evidence Violates Community Guidelines? What's up, A Dingo Ate My Baby? What's up, Tina? I'm doing really well, Lucky. Really well. Despite all the horrible stuff going on in the world, we still got to have peace of mind so that we can think clearly as we report everything, as we go on about our lives, because we owe it to ourselves to find happiness in our life. We're only going to be here temporarily, and we're not going to let these idiot ruling class people ruin our lives for us that much. We're going to have some control in our life, right? Worried that aliens abducted me. Oh, man. Do you guys think that's ever going to happen in our lifetime? I'm just getting some of these links sorted out. They're a little laggy. I'm going to have to refresh on some of these. We should be good. Lucky says, I think aliens are our government. It wouldn't be too far out there. Didn't The Simpsons kind of predict that? The Simpsons is predicting everything. All right, mic check. How do I sound? Mic check. Just want to make sure. Testing. Like $1,000,000, brother. Thank you, your boy Spittin'. What's going on, guys? Welcome to Frank Analysis. I'm your host, Franco. We're going to get started with this stream by talking about the Nicaraguan elections. And we're going to start by showing you guys some of the results. We're going to go through some of the footage that people that are on the ground there, the Convo Couch, Ben Norton, Caleb Maupin, and what they're saying and how that's different from what the United States is saying about these elections. So as of 3:35 p.m. on November 8th, 2021, which was yesterday, President Daniel Ortega is re-elected president of Nicaragua. The FSLN received 75.92% of the vote in Nicaragua's presidential and vice presidential race, with 97.74% of tally sheets scrutinized. Now, the Global South tends to have more secure elections than the U.S. And we're going to hear testimony from people who are there on the ground to see what they heard. Venezuela has secure elections. We've discussed that on this show, based off of research from the Center for Economic and Policy Research. But regardless, the U.S. is still going to try to impose, and they're going to try everything that they can to remove or stop a leftist leader from becoming or staying as president. So I'll show a little bit about the Convo Couch has been showing here. We'll come back to this. I'll come back to this as well. I just want to show Johnny over here talking about the voting process. He says the voting process in the NE autonomous region, hashtag Nicaragua. Voters had to show ID. Paper ballots, no VBN. Had 2 election officials verifying and explaining how to vote. Voters were taking less than 5 minutes to vote. 16-year-old and older eligible to vote. So even younger than people here. People at 16 can vote. So I'm going to adjust the audio here so that you guys can hear.
Here we are.
1 second. And Johnny here is going to walk us through what he saw.
Here we are, another voting center station that is open and running very peacefully and running very democratically. Again, so CNN, New York Times, you are lying. So she just voted, and she said it took 2 minutes for her to vote. And this is what we've been seeing all across all the voting centers that we've been to. 8 minutes, 5 minutes, 2 minutes. So we want to enter a junta. Let's go into this number 2, because you already possibly into number one before, well, I guess we need somebody to guide us, right? ¿Podemos entrar? Sí? Okay, gracias. Okay, so as you can see, this is junta número 2. And again, it's the same setup. This is a random one that we just went into. Possibly went into this one. It's the first one. It's the same thing. So you can see this is where people vote. It's very secluded. You have your little box here. You have a pen there to vote. You have the ballots. Hola, ¿cómo están? Perfecto. This is the roster. The roster. ¿Me puedes enseñar en una página? So mira, so look, people come in. They have their identifications, and then they have pictures of people's identification in there. They come in, bring their identification, show it, and then once they verify it, they give them the pen to sign. And once they sign, then they come over here to the other person who gives them the ballot. Ustedes usan el stamp, ¿no? Para el código, el número. So they use the stamp for the code number. They put it on the back of the ballot. They both sign off on the ballot. They explain how to vote, who and what races there are. And then they, and then the person can go over there, vote, fold it up, put it in this box, and then get their thumb inked. And then that's their proof that they voted, and that's everything. And they can't vote again. Oh, no, tú eres PLS. Yatama. Okay, there's 3 different parties. FSLN. 3 different parties there. So that would be like having Democrat, Republican, and a Green Party observing what's going on over here. They don't look at who's voting. They don't look at what the person's voting for. They're just seeing that the process is a democratic process and that everything is happening democratically, that they get the thumbprint inked on. Gracias. Here we are.
So I could be wrong on this, but it seems like the communities are really small and everybody knows each other here. But other than that, the process seems really straightforward and secure. So I'm going to break this down with my guest who I'm going to have on in a little bit here. But this is what Joe Biden is saying. He's released a hostile interventionist statement on Nicaragua's free, sovereign, and democratic elections. So I'll read a little bit of this and I'll come back to it. What Nicaraguan President Daniel Ortega and his wife, Vice President Rosario Murillo, orchestrated today was a pantomime election that was neither free nor fair, and most certainly not democratic. The arbitrary imprisonment of nearly 40 opposition figures since May, including 7 potential presidential candidates, and the blocking of political parties from participation rigged the outcome well before Election Day. They shuttered independent media, locked up journalists and members of the private sector, and bullied civil society organizations into closing their doors. Long unpopular and now without a democratic mandate, the Ortega and Murillo family now rule Nicaragua as autocrats, no different from the Somoza family that Ortega and the Sandinista fought 4 decades ago. Right? We'll come back to that, and we'll read the second paragraph as well. But from what I know, there are journalists in Nicaragua who, some of which are funded by right-wing groups in the U.S. Some of them are Trump supporters. And from what it looks like, it looks like a lot of people are celebrating the victory of Daniel Ortega. Fiorella here tweets out, she's quoting what propagandists are saying about the election. Says there's no excitement for Daniel Ortega. Most people abstained, and many were forced to vote for him. But I mean, that's not what we're seeing here. People are recording him. People are celebrating over here. Let me find the audio for that so you guys can listen to the music. They're singing the public is with Daniel. The mothers, the children, they're all with Daniel. I mean, here we have some more. Nicaragua celebrate today's popular electoral victory following CSE's first election results bulletin. Sandinista singer Bela performs Vivir en Amor in Managua. Here's some more celebrations. Since imperialist goons and propagandists continue their lies, here's a thread of videos showing all the joy from Nicaraguan people last night as Daniel Ortega was reelected via a fair process, debunking their lies and attempts to classify this election as fraudulent. He says, y otra, another one. More dancing. I mean, it seems pretty obvious to me people are happy over there. And once again, looking at the voting process here, here's Pasta. He was tracking this individual here and took the time it took for this person to vote.
Oye, mira, aquí es hasta, bueno. Oye, mira, ¿cómo te llamas? I'm Manafort. So you're voting today, right? Okay, we're going to start the clock. You ready? Is it rolling? Bueno. ¿Cómo te llamas uno más? Manafort. We'll see how long it takes him to vote. Bueno, I'll follow you.
Go for it. So we're just showing all the entire process of what it took for this individual to vote.
8 minutes and 43 seconds from a man to vote. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. How do you feel? Bueno, gracias.
Bien, bien.
Bien?
Sí, bien.
Gracias. Thank you so much. 8 minutes, 43 seconds to vote. America, can we get to this time right here? 8 minutes, 43 seconds to vote. Look at that. Everybody. He didn't have to get pizza. He didn't order Chinese food. 8 minutes, 43 seconds. Gracias.
All right, and then they go on to say it took some voters in the 2020 Democratic primary, like the primary, over 6 hours to vote in the U.S. I mean, that's transparency there, seeing like the whole process that it took for this individual and for the other individuals that we saw in the other clips here. But regardless of that, in addition to Joe Biden's statement, here we have the OAS is calling on the international community to demand the annulment of Nicaragua's November 7th election and for the holding of a new electoral process and 17-page report. So you can already imagine they're probably gonna send people over to look over the election, and it wouldn't surprise me if they do something to rig it against Daniel Ortega. For all the above, the international community must demand the annulment of the election on Sunday, November 7th, and call for the holding of a new electoral process with guarantees, electoral observation, and true electoral competition. I mean, they already had that. And we're gonna see the testimony here from other people who were there. Just going over here at Ben Norton's tweet over here, he's debunking this New York Times journalist saying Nicaragua is holding what it calls an election today. Daniel Ortega has prepared by arresting all credible challengers, shutting down opposition parties, banning large campaign events, closing voting stations en masse. Really now. So Ben says, absurd fake news from U.S. government's mouthpiece, New York Times. Unlike this propagandist, I'm actually in Nicaragua reporting on the elections. I went to 4 different voting stations. They were all full with a totally calm, transparent process. There are 7 options on the ballot, 6 opposition. I mean, does it look like Daniel Ortega sent his goons over here? Everything looks peaceful over here. 1 second. My screen is a little frozen. I don't know if you guys can see that. I don't know what just happened to my screen. 1 second, guys. Let me see if me minimizing it will change anything. That's weird. Was I hacked or something? I know that Facebook accounts are being like censored for talking about the Nicaraguan elections, as what was reported on by the Gray Zone. Now I don't know what's happening to my computer here. Let's see if I go to another tab here. It's probably just that one tab that's cursed. Yeah, it's that one tab. Someone else who was there on the ground, Caleb Maupin. Let's hear what he had to say.
The government of Nicaragua has gone out of its way to encourage the participation of its population in the political process. They've lowered the voting age to 16. They have laws mandating that women be elected in the government and that 50% of the candidates of every party be women. They're doing everything they can to try and ensure that their people go out to vote, to bring their people into the political process. They have voter privacy. They have voter transparency, and when you look at this, the huge effort to bring the people, the broad masses of people into the electoral political process, this is far different than what we have in the United States. I mean, this is a government that is trying to advocate on behalf of the working class and the broad masses of people, and in order to do that, they have to have an electoral system that brings in the broad masses of people and encourages their participation. Look, in the United States, we have our elections on a Tuesday, not a national holiday. People line up for hours to vote before work. They line up for hours to vote after work. In the United States, there's whole regions. Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, Guam, that have absolutely no say in who is elected to the U.S. Congress or who becomes president. But yet, here in Nicaragua, in a socialist country that's demonized as a quote-unquote dictatorship by the United States, we see a much bigger effort to include people in the electoral process, a much bigger level of transparency, a much bigger level of voter participation, and I mean, this is ridiculous what we're hearing in U.S. media. I must say, you know, if you question U.S. elections and the integrity of the U.S. electoral process, if you question that, you get your Facebook account taken down, you get your Twitter account taken down. There's all this effort to ensure that no one's allowed to question the outcome of U.S. elections. But this election hasn't even happened yet. And the USA is already poised to put new sanctions on Nicaragua in response to these elections. They're basically threatening the people of Nicaragua. If you dare vote for a socialist leader, we are going to hit your country with economic sanctions. We're going to hurt your economy. If that's not election meddling, what is it? What is election meddling? You know, the hypocrisy of all of this is just astounding.
I mean, there's more from Caleb Maupin here. So here he has,
So
we've
I'm
been
here
lied to.
outside of a polling station in Chinandega, Nicaragua, and I must say it just makes me downright angry to see how our leaders have lied to us. I'm here in Nicaragua. It's election day, and today is a Sunday. It's a national holiday, and it's a weekend. They're doing everything they can to make sure that their people vote, to encourage their people to get to the polls, to encourage their people to participate. In the United States, we have our election on a Tuesday, and there's lines around the block, people voting before work, voting after work. There's every barrier created. But here, they have a very transparent electoral process. They are trying to get people involved in voting. They are trying to encourage participation. The voting age is 16, so people as young as 16 are able to participate in choosing the leaders of the country. The hypocrisy we get from U.S. leaders is ridiculous. You know, the United States, if you live in Guam, if you live in Puerto Rico, if you live in any of the U.S. territories, you have absolutely no say in who is president of the United States. Now, could you imagine if Daniel Ortega were to pick a region of Nicaragua and say, oh, they don't get a say? That would never happen. That would never be tolerated. And the sheer hypocrisy of U.S. leaders who just go out of their way to demonize the elections of Nicaragua. It's shocking and horrifying. It's really, really shocking and horrifying, the hypocrisy here. It's really unbelievable. And the fact that, you know, in the United States, if you so much as question the electoral system, you can have your Facebook taken down. You can have your YouTube channel taken down. You can have your social media censored just for questioning the U.S. electoral process. But even though Nicaragua is having a completely fair and transparent election, regardless of that fact, U.S. media is endlessly trying to cast doubt and suspicion on it. And the CNN has lied about the election observer crew here and dismissed us and made it sound as if we are not legitimately overseeing this process. This is an open, transparent election, and U.S. media gets to lie and cast doubt about it endlessly. But if you question American elections, they shut down your social media. That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. The hypocrisy from U.S. leaders here. This is a clear and transparent election. People are participating in the voting process. They have all kinds of mechanisms to make sure people aren't voting twice, to make sure that people are able to participate and exercise their right to vote. I mean, this is what we're being told in the United States just isn't true.
Yeah, unbelievable. I mean, showing the U.S. still acting as a colony, not allowing Puerto Ricans or people in Guam to have a say in what the U.S. does, and then the U.S. goes even beyond that and tries to control other countries' elections that they don't have colonial power over. And then here's a video that Caleb has where he shows this individual here walking through the voting process. So adding on to what the Convo Couch showed in their footage. Here is Margaret Kimberly again with the. All right, there we go, and she pretty much speaks on what she saw and how it contradicts everything that the U.S. and the U.S. mainstream media is saying about how unfair the election was.
What we saw is in direct contradiction to what people in the U.S. are being told about the Nicaraguan election.
En breve, lo que nosotros vimos es una contradicción directa a lo que se le dicen al pueblo de Estados Unidos acerca del proceso electoral en Nicaragua.
The presence of our group and other companions has been vital in telling the people of the world about events here.
La presencia de nuestro grupo y de otros acompañantes ha sido esencial para contarles al resto del mundo lo que ha sucedido aquí.
I don't mean to be boastful in making that statement.
Y no quiero ser pachenta en hacer tal declaración.
My goal is to point out the degree of manipulation being orchestrated around the world by the U.S. government and others who would deny the Nicaraguan people their rights to self-determination.
Mi propósito es para señalar el grado de manipulación que está siendo orquestada en todo el mundo por parte del gobierno de Estados Unidos y otros que quieren negarle al pueblo nicaragüense su derecho a la autodeterminación.
The U.S. government passed the Renacer Act, imposing sanctions on the government, sanctions that will harm the people who freely exercise the franchise, all under the guise of helping them.
All right, and then one more here with Fiorella, who is also here. But before I do that, I want to add on here. Again, shout out to Casocha News for putting all this information out. Coup plotting Luis Almagro unleashes on Nicaragua, urging OAS countries to respond to their clear violation of the democratic charter. The OAS releases a 17-page report on the strengthening democracy in Nicaragua, despite having no presence in Nicaragua. And lastly, I do want to show, well, I'll come back to this. There's just so much footage that's being shown out there by great journalists that are on the ground. I can break this down with my guest as I bring them on here. So I do want to introduce here Ramiro Sebastián Funes, who is a socialist journalist and communist. He has his own channel named after himself. He's also a filmmaker. He's been to Nicaragua. He's filmed a documentary on there. Spoke to several people that live in Nicaragua. So Ramiro, it's great to have you on here. What's up, man?
How's it going, brother? Doing all right?
Yeah, doing great, man. Can you hear me well?
I do. I hear you well, and I really appreciated the breakdown that you gave in the beginning with all the videos and screenshots, because it's stuff that we're not going to see anywhere in mainstream media. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, definitely had to add that context for people. So just real quick, just to give some context to people about what you do, you want to let people know about the dictatorship that you saw when you went to Nicaragua and when you filmed your documentary. What was the lifestyle that people had as they were living in Nicaragua? What did you see?
Most definitely. So thanks again for having me on. I'm a Honduran communist content creator based in LA. I went to Nicaragua twice this year, and I had some serious FOMO this whole weekend, a fear of missing out. When I saw all my friends, all my revolutionary comrades, like everybody, it's kind of like prom night, and you can't go to prom, and everyone knows at prom, and I'm stuck at home. So, but it's all good. You know, shout out to everybody who was out there, to Caleb, to Fiorella, to Convo, to Kalsachun, everybody who's out there doing amazing work. I went to Nicaragua twice this year, once in March and again in July for the anniversary of the Sandinista Revolution, July 19. And both times I went was really incredible. I was able to produce this documentary, Nicaragua Against Empire, and I got to travel all across Nicaragua. It's sad to say, I think I know more of Nicaragua at this point than my own country of Honduras, where my family's from. And that's because Nicaragua is so much safer. Nicaragua is the safest country in Central America, and it borders the most dangerous country in Central America, which is Honduras, which is where my family is from. And Nicaragua is a country that is extremely identical to Honduras culturally, very similar, because we're talking about very small countries, right? It's not like South America where you have bigger countries. Like Peru's a huge country. Argentina is a huge country. Central America, the size of all the Central American countries together is about the size of the eastern seaboard in the U.S., if not smaller. So it's like driving from, it's like saying, oh, I'm going from D.C. to North Carolina to Georgia. That's how small and short the distances are. And even though Honduras and Nicaragua are so similar culturally and historically, they're so different in terms of the economic and political systems. In Honduras, you have a right wing, capitalist, pro imperialist government. You have some of the highest homicide rates, the highest poverty rates, the highest femicide in Latin America overall. Meanwhile, Nicaragua is among the top 10 most gender equal countries in the world, not just Latin America, in the world. And Nicaragua also has electricity for everybody. Over 99% of the country is electrified. The roads are better in Nicaragua than in the US, I'll tell you that much. And there's also a lot of healthcare, free education, free healthcare, a very extremely low cost housing. There's housing units that are as low as $6 a month for Nicaraguans who are working class, who are from the community. So there's a lot of programs that benefit the people under 21st century socialism, under Sandinismo. It's not perfect. It's not a utopia. There's so many problems, and many of those problems are created by sanctions, which were just
Right.
imposed, as some of the comrades were mentioning in the video, the Renacer Act and the Nica Act, which preceded it as well. Sanctions that are stranglehold on the economy. But despite all of that, Nicaragua has been able to prosper and is happy and healthy. I think one of the things that has saved Nicaragua, one thing that I really didn't know about until I went there, is the importance of food sovereignty. Over 90% of what people eat in Nicaragua is grown locally and within 10 miles of where they're from. So they're not dependent on multinational companies, on Burger King, McDonald's, Pepsi, Coca Cola, all of that, and Monsanto. They're not dependent on those companies to eat and survive. And that's why they've been able to survive these harsh and brutal sanctions, because of their policies of self reliance, of socialism, and solidarity.
It sounds way healthier over there. And you mentioned that Nicaragua is not perfect. I bet you anything that if Ortega was replaced with whoever the United States wanted as president, things would be way worse. And it would bring the country backwards so much, right? That they have to climb all the way back up in order to fix whatever destruction is brought by U.S. imperialism, right? So we see
Most
here
definitely.
we so I broke down I read a little bit of Joe Biden's letter here because he's not recognizing the elections in Nicaragua, saying that it's corrupt. So I'm just gonna get your thoughts on this second. I'm gonna finish up reading the second paragraph. The United States stands in support of the inalienable right to democratic self-determination of the Nicaraguan people and those of any other country in the hemisphere where popular sovereignty is compromised by the erosion of democratic norms, stifling of civic space, or violations of fundamental rights. The inner American democratic character obligates the hemisphere to stand up for the democratic rights of the Nicaraguan people. We call on the Ortega Murillo regime, maybe that's what they're calling it, to take immediate steps to restore democracy in Nicaragua, and to immediately and unconditionally release those unjustly imprisoned for speaking out against abuses and clamoring for the right of the Nicaraguans to vote in free and fair elections. Until then, the United States, in close coordination with other members of the international community, will use all diplomatic and economic tools at our disposal to support the people of Nicaragua and hold accountable the Ortega Murillo government and those that facilitate its abuses. So putting into context all the videos that we saw, the evidence that we see of the election process, this sounds like a threat. It sounds like lies. And considering the election process in the U.S., the history of election integrity in the U.S., it sounds so hypocritical. And can you imagine if other countries were just calling the U.S. The Biden regime, or before that the Trump regime? So what do you want to say about this, Ramiro?
I mean, it's a complete joke. First of all, we're talking about a country that has invaded Nicaragua over 12 times. In the early 1900s, the U.S. invaded Nicaragua about 10 times. There was two other instances with Marines, with direct troops forcing elections on the country, quote unquote elections, also backing one of the most brutal dictatorships, the Somoza family dynasty that ruled the country for decades. during that time period, the U.S. had no problem at all with quote unquote dictatorship in Nicaragua. The Somoza family was propped up by the U.S. Nicaragua was used as a training ground for counter-revolutionary forces all over the hemisphere. A lot of the Cuban gusanos who participated in the Bay of Pigs and subsequent terrorist attacks on Cuba were armed and trained in Nicaragua because it's not too far from Cuba. And Nicaragua under the Somoza regime was horrible. It was violent. There was no free elections. Communists and socialists were banned. And since the Sandinistas have taken power, they've always had free and fair elections. They've had the support of the masses. And at this point, it's a complete joke. Just reading that statement, I mean, it seems like complete nonsense because it's not based in any sort of reality at all. We're talking about a government that had over 75% of the votes. Daniel Ortega is one of the most popular presidents in Latin America and the Caribbean. And it's something that I want to hear now address people, liberals and quote unquote leftists who are skeptical of Daniel Ortega, because there's a lot of people, especially with some boomers, no offense to boomers, there's some good boomers out there, but there are some boomers out there who are like, oh, I supported the Sandinistas in the 70s and the 80s, but Daniel Ortega, he held on for too long. He's a dictator, and so there's kind of that approach, right? And it's interesting because in one of the statements that you read earlier, I forget who said it, but it was interesting because that's one of the talking points, right? They say Daniel Ortega and Rosario Murillo and the Sandinistas, they oppose the Somoza dictatorship and regime. So they'll at least admit that the Somozas were a dictatorship and a regime, but then they'll subvert it and twist it. And they'll say, and now they've become just like them. Now they're equally as Somoza. And there have been pictures of quote unquote pro-democracy protests by these Nicaraguan opposition people. Well, they'll have a picture of Somoza on one side and Daniel Ortega on the other side and equating the two. So that has sort of been the liberal imperialist narrative about Nicaragua that has actually been dominant. I mean, you would have to go somewhere like Miami or even here in LA, where I'm talking to you from, where there are some really right-wing Nicas who are very pro-fascist, they're like, I love Somoza, but they're actually kind of a minority, right? Like you have, what's her name in the media? She's like some Fox News commentator, and she's like openly fundraised for the Contras and all that. But then you have the more dominant, I forget her name. Well, I'll remember.
Navarro from, yeah.
Exactly. Like she's openly just pro-contra. She's like, we need to get the Somozas. But then you have the other wing that uses feminism, that appropriates it, right? And subverts it. That uses feminism, uses environmentalism, uses and LGBTQ struggles, and finds any sort of incongruencies or contradictions within the Sandinista revolution, which there are. There are things that need to be worked out and that the Sandinistas are working out. But they'll capitalize on that. They'll spread that gap. And they'll say Daniel and the Sandinistas are just as dictatorial as the Somozas. They're homophobic, they're transphobic, they're conservative, and they brand them. And it forms part of that perfect strategy of imperialism, of attacking the left from the left, of using the color revolution style, NED style approach. We have to remember that the president of the National Endowment for Democracy, Carl Gershman, who recently retired earlier this year, his first project was Nicaragua. He came into power in 1983, Reagan appointee, and he was the guy who came up with the whole Contra strategy and branding them as pro-democracy protests. So a lot of the stuff that we're seeing with the color revolutions, with the hashtag SOS insert country here, all of that was tried and tested in Nicaragua in the 80s and the 90s. And the class consciousness in Nicaragua is so high that the working class people, they see through it right away because they've been through it. They were the first ones to experience it. And they know what the synthetic left is. They know what the pro-imperialist left is. And they've overcome that. And that's why in Nicaragua, it's a mindset perspective shift. Because in the US, many people on the left feel embarrassed to stand by a leader, to say, I support this leader, whether good or bad, regardless of whatever flaws they have, I defend them. Because at that point, you're brainwashed, you're a tool, you're in a cult. But in Nicaragua and all over the global south, the same in Venezuela with Maduro and Chavez, and in Cuba with Miguel Díaz-Canel, people have their leaders and they defend them. And there's nothing wrong with that. So I think it's something that culturally to a lot of quote unquote liberals and leftists in the US who have a hard time coming to terms with the fact that Daniel is popular. He is a man of the people. They have to go to another country, go to other places and see how the perspective is different. People are not ashamed to openly defend their leader.
Yeah, I mean, if they didn't want their president, I mean, we're seeing that how secure their elections are, then they would vote him out. If he can stay there for as long as he wants, as long as that's what the people, the majority of the country wants, and it's none of the U.S.'s business to interfere in that. It's up for the country to figure out their issues. And speaking of people who are synthetic, inauthentic people, here we have all these politicians who try to act as if they're working on behalf of the people and what we want and that they're looking out for the little guys in the global south, because that's how they think of people in other countries. Ben Norton reported on this in a tweet saying that more U.S. economic warfare in Nicaragua. The House Representatives just voted 387 to 35 for the brutal Renacer Act, which will impose devastating sanctions on Nicaragua. So even more, the Senate already approved it. Bipartisan sadism is to punish Nicaraguans for not letting the U.S. colonize them. And there's a whole thread on that. They agree. U.S. imperialism is a bipartisan thing. It's supported by Democrats and Republicans. We got to see beyond this two-party illusion. And additionally to that, these people that call themselves progressives, like Ro Khanna, Katie Porter, and Jamie Raskin, who's from my district, they voted yes on this. And here's the article that goes more into depth with this. So, Ramiro, I learned a lot about you, about social imperialists like AOC, and some of these other progressives who try to act like they're looking out for us and that they're going to try to fight for peace in other countries. What do you have to say about this stuff?
It's a perfect example of why we shouldn't believe any quote unquote socialist or progressive who are praised in imperialist media. If you're a quote unquote socialist and you're being praised in the New York Times and MSNBC and CNN, something's off there, right? If the empire, the biggest imperialist forces, the energy companies, the banking institutions, the global capitalist elites, if they're backing you and supporting you and giving praise to you, something is off there. And that's exactly what we've seen manifest. We see these so-called progressives, AOC, for example, who met with Bolivian coup plotters after the 2019 coup in Bolivia, people like Bernie Sanders demonizing Venezuela and Cuba and Nicaragua, and all these progressives who claim to be anti-war, claim to be against empire, and they vote for military spending for Israel and also approve sanctions on Nicaragua. It just goes to show you that we have to, as Marx himself describes, move beyond the realm of appearances. Just because somebody has the title socialist or progressive in their name doesn't mean that they truly are that. And a lot of times, reality is inverted from what is portrayed in mainstream media. Because again, right, in mainstream media, Daniel Ortega is not portrayed the same way he was in the 70s. Because here's the thing. If you look at an article from Time magazine, I think in the 80s, it had a picture of Daniel Ortega on the cover with the gorilla outfit, with the red and black bandana, and it said, "The man who makes Reagan see red." And it branded the socialists and the communists as a scary thing, as a revolutionary thing, as something that will disrupt a peaceful American conservatism. Now that strategy has flipped. Now the biggest threat to the global anti-imperialist movement are the liberal imperialists who brand people like Daniel Ortega and Maduro and Assad and Miguel Diaz-Canel as conservatives, as homophobes, as backward reactionary people, as dictators, as tyrants. The script has completely flipped, and it's something that we have to take note of, because if we're not aware of these strategies, then they're going to be used on more governments. One of the key institutions that has been crucial in promoting this is this institution called the Oakland Institute. And the Oakland Institute is some Soros-backed NGO in Oakland, California, a hipster paradise. And one of the things that the Oakland Institute has been doing is putting out stories, nonstop fake stories about how Nicaragua's Sandinista government is oppressing indigenous Miskitu communities earlier you had the video of the compañero who was in northeastern Nicaragua in the indigenous Miskitu homeland, which is an autonomous region, by the way. It's completely run by indigenous, Afro-indigenous peoples as part of the constitution. So they have their own national sovereignty there. And the Oakland Institute has been claiming that the Sandinistas are engaging in genocide, that they're killing indigenous people en masse. Well, I went to that area. I interviewed people. I went to a school funded and created by the Sandinistas where they're promoting the teaching of indigenous Miskitu languages, where they're creating a whole new generation of Miskitu indigenous engineers and doctors and lawyers and cultural preservers. So it's a complete lie, and they're using, again, right? They're weaponizing identity reductionism. They're trying to use the indigenous angle, the women angle. A few years back, it was the canal, right? That if we build this canal that can rival the Panama Canal, that we're going to destroy the environment. So all sorts of strategies are being used.
It reminds me of what they were saying about Afghanistan, talking about women's rights. Oh, now that the Taliban's taking over in Afghanistan, like, what about the women, right? Oh, sure. What about the women that you've been bombing, right? That's a beautiful cat.
Oh, thank you. His name is actually Sandino.
Oh, Sandino.
Sandino the cat. But yeah, it's totally true, man. And the thing with Afghanistan is that a lot of the neocon Zionists who have been pushing for war in Afghanistan, Bill Kristol and all these other people, have understood that that method is very successful, right? Because you're not going to convince people by using the strategies of the past. In the 40s and the 50s, in Guatemala, for example, the 1956 coup against Jacobo Arbenz and the United Fruit Company, it's like, we need to go in and take out communism and install capitalism in the United Fruit Company. That doesn't work anymore. That doesn't have good PR strategy and branding to it. Now it's all about using what's popular with the youth or what's being circulated, and they know that very well, and they're trying to do this with Nicaragua.
I just want to, these comments here will tie in to what I want to ask you here. Evidence violates community guidelines put up. Katie Porter, who supports censorship on YouTube, who we were just talking about, voted yes on increasing pressure on Daniel Ortega. Thomas, Oklahoma, said AOC and the squad need to be called out and embarrassed by a real leftist journalist at a press conference. I don't know if... Oh, at a press conference. Okay, I was thinking... I don't know. I processed like in front of Congress, like another politician was like, yeah, that's not going to happen. AOC is so naive. She probably doesn't care about her own people across Latin America. I mean, that's very apparent now. I mean, she doesn't say anything about how her people in Puerto Rico don't have a say in U.S. elections. So I want to ask you, Ramiro, who do you think is more dangerous? These right-wingers that are more obvious about their stances and how they don't care about people in Latin America or anyone in the global South, or liberals or leftists that promote for censorship, which is now including the censorship that's happening to Nicaraguans on Facebook. People like AOC, who, as you said, she supports coups. She stood with the Bolivian coup leaders. She's not saying anything about this. She spoke against Maduro, saying that she stands with the people's freedom in Venezuela, and pretty much like picturing, trying to make Maduro out to be this like tyrant, saying that as if they don't have like a fair election process in Venezuela. But yeah, what would you say? Who do you perceive as more dangerous, or do you say that this is just how it is, and we just have to see through both of them? What would you say?
That's a great question. It's something I've been thinking about a lot. I think initially I would say that the liberal imperialist wing is the most dangerous. But one thing that I think is important to mention is the danger of the right-wing evangelical Zionist faction in Latin America and the Caribbean, which I didn't really understand until I went to Honduras in 2019. At the end of 2019, I went to go see my family, and I can't tell you how many evangelical churches I saw with the flag of Israel, how many of these churches were Zionists, had the U.S. and Israel flag, were organizing spaces for the right-wing Zionist conservatives. And this is dangerous. And this is something that in the US we don't really see too much of, right? Because we see a lot of the social imperialists, the quote unquote leftists, AOC, all these people, and they're very dangerous. Don't get me wrong. They own Silicon Valley, right? They censored the accounts of hundreds of Sandinista accounts that had thousands of followers. Like imagine one day, and I know these people too. I met them. I spoke to them. I interviewed one of my comrades, Camilo, who I met in Nicaragua. They had pages and channels with like tens of thousands of followers all over the world, and just like that, vanished. No strikes, no nothing, just wiped off. And that's a lot of work that goes into that. And this was again days before the election, knowing already this was a targeted attack, right? It's not like it was something that they said during the election. It was an orchestrated event. So I don't want to underestimate the imperial left violence because it's Silicon Valley, it's the NGOs, the color revolutions, the NED, and that's very disastrous and brutal.
Yeah.
However, on the other hand, we have to keep in mind that within the right wing, the evangelical Republican right wing that represents the Somoza crowd, that represents that faction, it's very dangerous. What they're doing in Central America in particular is that they're using these evangelical churches to support right-wing fascist ideology. For example, look at Bolivia in the 2019 coup against Evo Morales. You had Janine Áñez and these psychopaths who came in with the Bible and said that this is the new law of the land.
Yeah.
They accused indigenous peoples of being satanic. They said that they worship the devil, that they were polytheists, and basically implementing genocide. We know in Guatemala during the 80s, another right-wing evangelical Zionist, Efraín Ríos Montt, who was backed, right, who helped train the Contras, who was backed by Reagan, backed by the neocon establishment. He also oversaw a genocide of thousands and thousands of indigenous Guatemalan Mayans who were communist, leftist, sympathetic, some cases not even political, and also using that same rhetoric, right, that is used against Palestinians. They're primitive, they're animals, they're barbaric, they're not holy like us. And we're also seeing this in Honduras with Juan Orlando Hernandez, the right-wing government that is implementing these free market neoliberal cities and wiping indigenous people off the map. Let's not forget that Berta Cáceres, an indigenous Lenca woman, was murdered by a right-wing evangelical Zionist government and many other activists. So the threat of this right-wing neocon, Israel-loving, Taiwan-loving faction is very real. And I think they're a little bit more discreet about it. And they're making moves in the background very softly, very carefully. Steve Bannon advises a lot of these people. It's a lot of the same people who are against China. They think China is like some satanic empire. So while I do think that on the one hand, the liberals, because you have like that one camp, right? Like the Russia-hating liberal NGO, granola, soy latte hipster people. And then you have like the right-wing neocon, Zionist, China-bashing evangelicals who are very dangerous as well. So I don't want to underestimate one or the other. I think right now the Silicon Valley liberals are definitely the biggest threat, but I think in the long term, the right-wing neocons are also a threat to be reckoned with.
Yeah. I think it depends on the group also. Like if you're like in a group of a bunch of leftists, some of them may be, some individuals may be overlooking what leftists do and the tactics that they use to try to infiltrate. And then sometimes the people that realize this start to focus too much on that they may overlook what the right is doing. And they don't pay enough attention to what right-wing commentators like or with right-wing talking points like Tim Pool say. Like they overlook that stuff. And Tim Pool has a lot of followers and he's manufacturing their consent, misinforming them. Like this is dangerous. So at the end of the day, we got to keep our eye on both, the right and the left, and the tactics that they're using to try to manufacture people's consent for more imperialism. So you want to give a shout out before you head out about I want to hear more about your documentary, and what advice you'd give to people who want to go out and do something similar and show footage about what's happening in other countries in the global south.
Yeah, most definitely. So basically, as I mentioned earlier, I went in March and in July. In March, I was able to produce the documentary Nicaragua Against Empire, and I traveled to three main areas. The first area is Managua, which is the capital, which is where a lot of the coverage has been based. The second area is Esteli, which is in the northern rural part of Nicaragua, which borders Honduras, and is home to the resistance against the Contras, because it borders Honduras. It's where the U.S. armed and trained the Contras, and Esteli, where I visited, was one of the places that was on the front lines of the resistance to the Contras, and is also the homeland of Sandino, and where a lot of the highest revolutionaries came from, Carlos Fonseca and others. So northern Nicaragua has a very similar class character to that of southeastern Peru, in the rural indigenous area where some of the biggest revolutionaries came from. And I also visited Bilwi, which is on the Caribbean coast, the northeastern autonomous coast. And I was able to interview and talk to indigenous leaders who spoke about the 5 levels of governance, where their leaders are elected bottom up democratically by the indigenous communities there. The Frente Sandinista has to recognize the results of the indigenous, Afro-Indigenous community elections that they have. And it was a really beautiful experience going there. I went on a delegation with the Friends of the ATC, the Rural Workers Association, focused on food sovereignty and campesino rights. And it was a really beautiful experience. I suggest anybody who wants to visit Nicaragua, go through the Friends of the ATC. Their website is online. They have great programs, and it's a lot of youth from all over Latin America and the Caribbean who go to Nicaragua to study agroecology, to study food sovereignty, to study what it means to be self-sufficient in terms of your sustenance, because that's so important. And it was a really cool experience. I also got to meet a former one of the most interesting interviews. I haven't released it yet. It's one of the last ones that I've been working on. I'm going to release it soon. I met a woman who was one of the Contra commanders. So she was one of the heads of the Contras, the US-backed Contras, who did crazy stuff, like chopping off heads, burning people alive, funneling drugs to the US. And unfortunately, a lot of them were misguided. A lot of them were orphans. A lot of them were people who had no other option, who were drugged, who were put into a very difficult situation and brainwashed. And this woman, she killed dozens of people. She killed Sandinistas. She was a Contra leader. And after 1990, after the era of neoliberalism, when the Sandinistas came out of state power, right? Because there was 2 stages, 1979 to 1989, the first era of the Sandinista revolution after the armed struggle. 1990, Soviet Union was dismantled, neoliberalism kicked in, elections were held, and neoliberalism was in Nicaragua for 16 years until 2016 and 2006, 2007, when Daniel Ortega came back as president. So in 1990s, when she saw all these neoliberal rollbacks, privatization, all these horrible things, rolling back all of the gains of the Sandinista revolution, she began changing her mind. She began supporting the Sandinista and is actually now in the Sandinista party. And you have somebody who was at one point killing dozens of Sandinistas to now being one of the top leaders. She's somebody who also represents Parlacen, the Central American Parliament. She has pictures of Daniel Ortega. And it just goes to show you that the Sandinistas don't have a grudge against people, even some of their fiercest enemies from the 80s, even people who killed their families. They're like, look, that's all in the past. Let's build, let's unify. That's why the government is called the government of unity and reconciliation, of national unity of all sectors of Nicaraguan society. And that's what the brilliance of Daniel Ortega and the Sandinistas has been, is bringing people together in defense of sovereignty, in defense of their homeland. So that interview is going to come out soon. I am really excited about it because it's a very unique perspective. Somebody who went from being in a far-right terrorist, drug, narco gang that was killing people to somebody who is now in defense of the Sandinista revolution.
Awesome, man. I can't wait to listen to that interview. Ramiro has a great show. I have his channel linked in the description. And you make me jealous, man. I want to go to Nicaragua too. You're talking about how you feel like you're missing
Let me
out.
know. I got you.
You got to be there twice, man.
I went twice, and it was a blast. I went with my girlfriend Ophelia. we had such a great time. If you want to go to because a lot of times when you go to Latin America, and I don't know, I haven't been to Peru, but in a lot of Latin America, you sometimes having fun comes with the risk of going into dangerous places where there's a lot of violence or drugs. But
Mm.
Nicaragua is a very wholesome place. Like the best way I could describe it is like having fun at a family party where like there's no drugs, there's no like gangs, there's no crazy stuff going on, but you're still dancing, you're still having a good time. It's revolutionary, and it's still they make socialism relevant to the people.
Mm.
So the best way I can describe it is wholesome, it's safe, and if you want to go, man, let me know. I'll hook you up. I can hook you up to go there. And if anybody else wants to go, it's not about what camera equipment. I literally have a tiny little Canon Rebel that cost me like
Uh-huh.
$200 at B&H Photo, a tripod, and a microphone. Together, that was like $300 tops. And it's all about talking to the right people, having the right story. That's all that matters. And especially nowadays with iPhones, like this is a television studio in your hand.
Yeah,
You
it
can
is.
use this to capture great photo, and shout out to Fiorella who's been getting
Flashlight,
great stuff out
everything.
there. Right.
Yeah. All right, brother. It's great having you on. Check out Ramiro's channel. I'll have his documentary also linked. But yeah, Ramiro, it's a pleasure, brother. Thanks for coming
You,
on,
man.
man.
Thanks again, and keep up the great work, man. I hope everything
Same to
goes
you,
well. I hope
man.
they don't censor you because it's getting crazy out there.
Oh man, it's getting harder and harder to escape that. But yeah,
It is,
man,
bro.
take care.
Take care, brother. Peace.
Peace. All right, that was an awesome interview, man. Ramiro's a great guy. And speaking of great people, we have two people that are about to come on. We have Al Latham, who is on the Political Matrix with Marcus as a co-host, as well as with other people like Chris, who was here last week. Marcus isn't here yet, but Elle is here. I'll go ahead and bring her in just to see how she's doing. Latham, I'm so sorry, Latham. What's up, Elle? Nice to meet you.
Hey, my voice
How's-
might be weird. It was weird last time, in my head anyway. Just getting over a cold.
Oh, you sound fine.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah, so since this is your first time coming on, you want to tell people, what you do, what they can find at the Political Matrix, where you co-host with Marcus and other people.
Well, what I do on the show, The Political Matrix, is I research stuff, kind of like what you do. I get a bunch of material, I get a bunch of articles, and I talk about them, and try to make it fact-based, basically, and not be biased in my reporting. But, call out the bullshit when it's needed, But other than that, like for years, I've had my own podcast, which is superawkwardfuncast.podbean.com, or it's called Super Awkward Funcast. That was a promo. And I started in like 2013, and it started out as like a comedy thing because I've been in the comedy arena before this whole thing, before the apocalypse. And I was an actor and producer and director and writer. And I had people on who were funny and stuff, and we would like talk all of these topics and stuff. But then it got serious after a while. Good. And hey Thomas. Hey Shadowban. So then it got like serious as things got more crazy with like Julian Assange and everything that went on with the world and the wars and everything. And I would start talking about that a lot more instead of Kanye West, and then sort of put him on, on a little segment of it, but really focus on the main issues like the Obama presidency and then the Trump presidency and everything, and doing the work that, the mainstream media didn't want to do when it came to like holding the Trump's feet to the fire on actual issues. So I brought like up this whole scandal from the 80s that nobody really knows about, which was involving him and Adnan Khashoggi and the Iran-Contra affair. So, I would like put out this information. Not a lot of people would get it because it's a very, very, very low low download podcast, unfortunately. And so eventually I was trying to promote my podcast on Twitter, and I met Marcus through a thread from Slow News Day from Steve. And, you know, Marcus liked my shit, and then he came on my podcast, and then he let me come on Political Matrix as a guest, and I did some of the Great Reset stuff. And then I became a co-host. So that's pretty much the story.
Awesome. I like how I brought in Marcus as soon as you mentioned how he found you. And that was a cool origin story there. So you pretty much walked us through, you know, how you're awakening to things that are happening politically. And yeah, the Political Matrix is a great show. You can watch it on Saturday evenings, right around 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific, right, Marcus?
Yeah, what is that? Roughly. Sometimes we're at 7 Pacific. Sometimes we're at 8. So roughly around that ballpark. You know, we try not to go too late, but you know, sometimes getting all the technical shit out of the way. But you know, if you miss us live, then you know you can always catch us on the recast.
I will join you guys one day. It's just that I spend time with my wife and my family sometimes. Like me and my wife live together. My mom lives somewhere else with my sisters, and we sometimes go spend time. But there will be a day where I'm not doing that, and I'll come on the show and hang out with you guys, because it is like a mind blowing experience from what I listen to.
Well, another thing is, I gotta also plug my new show with one of my new colleagues I brought into the fold. What I call him my young ace, Jalen Lawson. We call it Talk of the Ages. And so on my main, now it's what we've been thinking, not what I've been thinking anymore. On that channel, we talk about a lot more pop culture, a bunch of different things from a different angle. And we also talk about it from him being Generation Z to me being a mix of Gen X, elder millennial. So we could also bring you on there too. We talk about a lot of interesting things.
I mean, I guess just for a little bit here before we get started with some of the main segments here, this AstroWorld concert with Travis Scott, 8 people dying, many people hospitalized, was making the rounds in the news. A lot of people are disgusted with Travis Scott's reaction to all this, how he continued the concert. Many people suffocated as they were being trampled over in the front of the crowd. What are your thoughts on that?
I guess my thoughts on it would be different than some other people, since I have a background in security, and I guess this would be like a trivia fact if you guys were trying to guess some stuff on me. I used to actually be in a band, and so though I've never performed to the levels of crowds like that, I understand what it's like to be on stage, have lights and stuff on your face, and not necessarily be able to see what's going on down in the crowd per se. And so I can only imagine on that level what it's like and how loud it is, and lights are all in your face, and you're concentrating on doing your show, and you have headphones in and stuff like that, where it's reverbing the music and you're sounding vocals through, and so much stuff that you're already distracted on. And to be able to tell exactly what's going on down in the crowd. Now, I'm not saying that he saw what was going on per se or didn't. I'm just saying that that's something we should definitely always keep in mind, that you never know what he was able to see when he was able to see it. And when you have so many concerts where people are pushing and shoving and all that stuff is going on and rushing the stage, some of those things could look very normal to many concerts he's had before. So I also have a hard time putting a lot of the blame on a performer when event organizers know what the capacity is supposed to be, know how people, know when people are pushing a little bit too much, when things are getting kind of out of control. They know how to go up there, cut the music, stop things, and get out there. And the fact that some of these steps weren't taken leans more back on event coordinators and security, in my opinion.
Okay. So the blame should be more on security and the concert organizers more than on Travis Scott.
In my opinion, definitely
Okay.
so because I mean, think about it. Travis Scott's what? How old? What? Early mid 20s. Um, he has what tens of thousands. Well, I don't know how many people it was, but I'm imagining at least over 10,000 people definitely were there. Um, and when you're looking at a huge sea of people with tons of lights and smoke and all the different things that they have going on in concerts, it's very hard for the performer themselves to actually see what's going on. I mean, it's a tragic and sad situation, but
Yeah.
we often have, every once in a while, we have these like, events that happen like this, where like a stage will collapse or, somebody will get trampled leaving a concert, or like I brought up on the show when we talked about it, what happened not that long ago in Israel, where you had one of their major religious festivals. They had a ton of people, and while everybody's exiting, they're kind of going down a decline. And people start picking up speed, a couple of people fall, and next thing you know, you're trampling over people. And I say, just imagine like if you're standing towards the front of the stage and you have 1,000 people behind you pushing you forward.
Yeah.
You couldn't stop, even if you see the people directly in front of you, to be able to not step on them or squeeze into things like that. So, I mean, I just think that we always have to keep all of these things cognizant. I mean, I'm not
Yeah.
saying security individually themselves could have ran out there and did this, but whoever's head of security, who's organizing, it's their job to be able to, always think safety first and focus on those things and pay attention to if things like that are starting to happen.
Okay. Oh, what are your thoughts?
Oh, I looked into it a little bit. I didn't watch the whole stream yet, so I don't know if I can really have an informed opinion about it because it was just a lot for me to handle. Like I was watching like little clips of like people describing the situation on Twitter and like different accounts, and it was just all very overwhelming and negative energy. And I just kind of wanted to put that away for a little while and get back to it at a later date because it's all very just sad, the whole situation. And people,
Yeah.
it's so weird because the media afterwards was like kind of acting like it was a shooting situation. They were doing like, oh, here's the victims, what they were doing, what they were saying beforehand. Like, I was like, it's so weird, like the way that everybody gets like 15 minutes of fame, even if it's under the worst circumstances in the world. Like it's just so weird that the media just keeps doing these things. Like they didn't do that obviously in the 90s. I don't think there were a lot of concerts where you would hear about the people who died and they'd have a whole story about them in the newspaper. It
Mm-hmm.
just wasn't like that, I don't think. So it's very weird with social media and what they're doing with the whole situation. A lot of clickbait, in my opinion, from the media as usual, trying to make a buck
Yeah.
off stress and pain from other people. And they can do that, but we can't talk about certain things on YouTube. Like that's not allowed. And we can't have graphic things in our reporting that they can have in their reporting. It's just different rules for different people. It's interesting.
Hell, not even only in their reporting. I've seen videos floating around on social media where they're literally showing the bodies of the people being
Yeah.
passed around through the crowd, and that's not being censored on YouTube or social media.
Nope.
Or
But if you
TikTok.
say one, yeah, or TikTok or any of these things, and I'm like, for one, there's a big rush to blame somebody very, very quickly. There's a big rush to go through Travis Scott's,
Always.
previous history and look at anything that he might have said or done to put the blame or fault. Whereas, let's just be honest, I'm going to say it this way: if it was somebody like Trace Atkins, you wouldn't be hearing this rush to judgment. And well, did Trace say this in his past, or did he say that? Or if it was Christina Aguilera, you're not going to see. You get what I'm saying? You're not going to see a lot of this rush to judgment. And it seems like when it tends to be somebody in the hip hop community, or let's just say it directly, of the darker hue, there's always more of a rush to judgment that they should have done something different or they should have been. I mean, I remember what was it, the Ariana Grande concert.
That's what I was just thinking.
there was no, oh well, she should have done this or she should have done that differently. And I just noticed that in the media, everybody always wants to be the first one to get the story out, first one to do this, first one to do that. And
If anything, she
part
was a victim in that situation. Remember, like they just victimized
exactly,
the shit out of her, and then she got in trouble for licking a donut. So, like, you know, it
yeah.
is weird what you get in trouble for and what you don't get in trouble for.
That's part of why we have no problem at the political matrix. Like we'll wait till we okay, the news might come out on a Monday, a Tuesday, and we're gonna do our story on our normal night. We're not gonna rush ahead to try to be ahead of the story because we prefer to be as have as much information and be as accurate as we can when we talk about these things instead of being the first one. So we try to always think about it in all the different angles. If this person did that or who did this, and look at it in all the different angles instead of just
Yeah.
being in such a rush to judgment like a lynch mob.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah, and I think.
definitely. My
Go
bad,
ahead.
L. I was just gonna say, yeah, definitely compile all the evidence that's out there, like TikTok videos from like different angles. I did see like people trying to warn Travis Scott, but I gotta relook at them again. Like people coming up trying to tell him, and he was just like, "Oh
Yeah.
no, like ignore." I don't want to. I would have to look at it again, whether if it was dismissive or he just was in the zone. I'd have to relook at them again. But I
Well,
definitely didn't think about that perspective of being in the performer's shoes. Although people
Oh
are
yeah,
comparing it to like other artists like Lil Pump or Linkin Park, or they show. I've seen a couple of videos on TikTok of people going like, "Oh, but look at how they reacted." It's like, "Oh man, one person fainted," and then they were like, "Hold up, everybody, hold up! If you're here, you're if you're on some kind of drugs or something, make sure you stay hydrated. Don't like push over it. Make some space." Like they stopped the show for people that faint.
well,
Um,
he saw someone passed out from his view, and had mentioned it. He had like stopped the show and mentioned the person, and said for the
Travis.
EMT to get over there.
yeah.
So
Oh,
like
okay.
there is proof of that on Twitter, but it's not good enough for people because they say he should have ended the whole thing right then and there and not continued singing afterwards. But he probably did not know that they were dead at that point.
And
I
and
see.
that's the point I'm trying to bring up. He probably just assumed somebody passed out, and not understood the gravity of the situation at the time.
Because this has happened
And
before. Because
yeah,
he's had concerts like this before.
and
Okay.
another thing you got to remember, performers are always having people run up on stage and say things or try to do
Right.
things,
Okay. Yeah.
and so you gotta always factor all those things in. I mean, I was like virtually nothing, as far as like a performer in our band, and we would have people try to do stuff like that and rush on stage, and so you can't always tell what's going on, especially when you're so focused on what you're doing. Now, when you're playing instruments, I think it's probably a little bit different because you're really focused on trying to remember a lot of things and focus on a lot of things. It might be harder to notice that than maybe a singer, but also, I believe that wasn't the concert kind of at a darker time where it's like that Lincoln Park one. I believe that
It
was
was.
like broad daylight where the sun is out, so you can see somebody like body is completely limp, and versus where it's a little bit darker and some of those things. So I just feel like there's not a lot of people who kind of try to look at these things and give the benefit of the doubt first before
Uh,
trying to put the blame.
Well,
and the
the media
concerts are
definitely wants to
crazier.
blame him.
Hmm. Yes, definitely.
And they're going back in his history and showing like him, his
When he
security
got his
people
shoes
talking
stolen
about
too.
people.
Yeah, they go
Yeah,
back to
that
that situation where the guy was stealing the shoes. Yeah,
Yeah.
that
and
one
then
incident.
and then I heard a lot of people where when it first came out, they were really going after like all of them. Like they were going after Drake and I can't remember who else was there, and putting a lot of the blame on them, and they weren't even on stage. I mean, they were probably didn't even see any of it going on.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. This is something like this is us just like chatting up about it. Like this isn't like, oh, like segment. Look at all this evidence and all that. Like this is, if I ever do break it down, I don't know if I will, but I definitely the more responsible thing to do is to show several angles, break that all down, rather than to have a
Yeah.
very reactionary analysis of it. You want to have the best quality analysis, and that usually takes more time and more thought.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that he necessarily didn't bear more blame or responsibility. I'm just saying at this point, we need to kind of sift it all out. Because I'll tell people one little story real quick. When I remember the Jussie Smollett situation, I was one of the first people to come out and defend Jussie Smollett. And then probably a couple of hours later and about a day later, I felt very, very silly because I automatically believed every single thing that he said when details came to show out that it was not accurate at all, anything that he was saying. So, just all of us be careful. And also, if we do pass that judgment right off the bat, have the humility to be able to come back and say, hey guys, I got this one wrong, or hey, I defended this person when hey, they actually were a little bit more guilty. So, we're none of us are perfect. We can, be able to just sift through the information and look at it and be reasonable what we actually find, whatever the conclusions bear out over time.
So before we move on to some of the Rockfin segments, we can talk about, the Rona and everything. I did want to get your guys' thoughts on the Internet of Nano Things. We've talked about the Internet of Things with guests such as Seb Solomon, Ali Alexandra's Shadow Band Refugee, but we've mentioned briefly things about regarding the Internet of Nano Things and its applications. I also talked about it a little bit with Max Blumenthal. He said he's going to look more into it. People like Alison McDowell are writing more about this, but this is something that elites are trying to use more to help get to Agenda 2030 for this fourth industrial revolution, for this great reset. And just really briefly, like, where is this nano things, these nanotechnologies going to be used? In this chart here, we see that it's going to be used in healthcare, as we talked about with Sebs and Ali when we broke down the Medicare for All Act, HR 1976 of the 117th Congress, which is the one that Pramila Jayapal wrote, and it's the one that, unfortunately, some people who were protesting in the March for Medicare for All were promoting. I mean, we got to read the fine print and make sure that we're not dealing with a Trojan horse. In healthcare, the Internet of Nano Things can be used to develop a body sensor network using in-body nanosensors that can monitor any patient's health and biological activity. In agriculture, nanosensors can collect real-time data about crop health and growth, soil moisture and quality, and usage of pesticides and insecticides. In environmental monitoring, nanosensors can precisely monitor air pollution and temperature in public places like parks, railway stations, airports, bus stops, and restaurants. Food products quality control. Internet of Nano Things can be utilized to check the quality of food products. In smart homes and factories, nanosensors can maintain specific temperatures, identify harmful gases, and monitor carbon emissions in smart homes and factories. This will be coupled with graphene, which will be used as a conductor for electricity. It's going to be used for a lot of things. We're pretty much moving into a realm of combining man with technology even further. We're already in a sort of stage like that where we have our phones with us all the time. We're always looking for information. There's benefits to that. But when it's when it's under the context of who is the ruling class right now, who has control of the country, this can be used against us with surveillance, right?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Especially with this right here, the Internet of Bio-Nano Things, right? This could potentially be used to monitor our health, to track whether we've received certain jabs. But they're trying to combine this nanotechnology with our physiology, with our biological person. And I can link this over to you guys as PDF in the chat. but I want to get Marcus and Elle's thoughts on this. What do you guys think of it?
Elle, you're going ahead and take it first. Give me 1 minute. I'm gonna grab my charger and I'll be right back.
Well, nothing surprises me, and I actually go to the website Biometric Update all the time to see what they've got planned in terms of their technology that they're using, like the facial recognition software, or the retinal scans, and the, IDs and everything. Like that's what they want. They want us to be basically robots. That's the whole point. Transhumanism, and having all these chips and stuff, and being able to control us. That's what it's all about. It's all about control and tracking people, and but it's for the greater good. Everything's for the greater good. We should
Right.
just submit and be happy.
I like what Thomas Oklahoma said here. It said pros. Nanobots will revolutionize healthcare by enabling doctors to see deep in the body. Yeah, I mean, under the right hands, we can use technology like this for good, but we don't live in that conscious society right now, especially with the current ruling class that we have. And then the cons here are that weapons will become dangerous and spying worsens. Is it worth it? Marcus, what are your thoughts?
My thing is, if you have a grasp of, because this is like I was reading some of the comments last time I was on, and somebody said in there, they were like, oh, the conversation got into like a weird religious area, and it's like, well, like me and Shadow Ben were saying, it's not for you guys to believe this stuff. You have to understand what the elites who are doing things, what they believe and how they perceive things. And that's far more important than what you actually believe, because, I mean, go back to, the art of war. It's know thy enemy. If you don't understand the people you're fighting against, then you can't predict or try to figure out how to counteract whatever they're trying to do to you. First and foremost, you have to understand that you are dealing with literal sociopaths, people who have no empathy for you, people who look at you as a thing, as a product, or as a number. Yes, I need this amount of workers, or I don't need that amount of workers. These amount of people who are taking up resources or taking up space, that's exactly how you're looked at. And so when you're dealing with people who think of you like that, who have this power and control, you got to understand where their end game is going. And this is kind of funny you brought this up, because this is leading to like a video I'm working on, which is covering something which David Icke was talking about. And David Icke, for those who don't know, he's been talking about a lot of this stuff for a long time. And this all ties in with the Agenda 2030, where, like I was saying, last time I was on, the elites, they do care about control, and they realize that we are not going to be happy with the direction that things are going in. So what they have to do is they have to find a way to keep us, keep the angry masses calm and placated. And so what they'll do is they will find ways to use these different technologies to placate us. And so one of those is with this nanotechnology, they will be able to, yes, like Thomas said, be able to use it in healthcare to be able to maybe find tumors and cancers and all kind of different things in your bodies. But another thing they're also going to be able to do is they're always going to be able to track you. Another thing is, what if they decide that they want to use it for even more nefarious scheme, to actually put a toxin into you, so that the pharmaceutical companies can have you coming back for more? What if they decide that they want to put something in to just kind of sterilize you, so that you're not able to, you don't know the applications of what these people are doing, and if you don't ever take the time to try to understand who these people are, what they believe, then you won't see any of these things coming, which they're trying to do. I mean, I know we talked about like AOC and all these different politicians and stuff like that earlier, but you got to remember, all of these people are only little tiny mouthpieces for these people who are way, way above them. All of these politicians are bought and paid for. And so this technology that they're going to be using, all of it's going to lead to more, was it virtual reality, more simulations. Another video I'm working on, sorry, I keep shamelessly plugging myself, but
feel free to do it, man. You're the guest.
a lot of this technology, they've been trying to put it in front of us for a long time so that they can get us used to it. For instance, like you talked about with the cell phones, if we have the cell phones always around us and always, always used to having it, it gets us used to that function. Then it'll get to a point where they say, well, all you got to do is, if you use this little nanotechnology, you don't even have to use ear sets anymore. You could just push a little button on the back of your ear and be able to hear music or hear communications. Or instead, maybe you can actually, that nanotechnology could make it so you can actually see whatever videos you want without needing your phone at all, where it pops up maybe in a virtual, sense. So there's so many applications they can do with these technologies, especially since they have so much of them on patent protections and we don't know the full capabilities and ramifications. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, like Bluetooth, the Bluetooth, and then now AirPods, like getting people used to that technology and used to that convenience. Oh, you don't want to have wired headphones, you have to fumble with the wires and everything. Just put it in your ear. You don't know where that mic, you don't know who is listening on that mic, and you don't know a lot about the technology that you use. But you got Vault 7, the release from the WikiLeaks, and it put a lot of that out there, that they had stuff put in before it even went out to the customer. Like they had things implanted in the technology that they used. So we know for a fact that they have that capability, that they can hack into whatever they want to hack into. So that makes it even more, annoying to see people buying into it and being like, oh yeah, I'm going to get chipped and it'll be good because I don't have to remember this and that and the other. They don't want you to remember. They don't want you to have a memory. They want to control your memory. They don't want you to have any thoughts of your own. Clearly, social media doesn't, because they crack down on people for thinking all the time differently from the narrative that they want to, display out to the world.
And then speaking of memory and also how we feel, how our body functions, the endocrine system, hormones and everything, it says here on this paper that I brought up earlier, the way that these nano things work with our cells is that they're going to work together to try to amplify and modify cell communication, protein expression, which is the basis for how traits are expressed. And so, like Marcus said, if they want to produce a certain toxin in your body, they can send messages to these nano things to interact with your cells in ways to communicate with your body, make you feel a certain way, make you forget certain things, since that's how our brains work, right? It's cell to cell communication. It is all possible.
And another thing I'd like to add in, take down levels of testosterone, so that and other factors, so that it takes away aggression. Yeah, you might be upset with the system, but it's less likely you're going to be able to do anything if they can take away those chemical signals that go to the brain for you to be upset with some of these things.
It's a dark ages that we're heading in, man. It's Black Mirror is becoming reality, right? We talked about the metaverse, virtual reality, right? These nano things. What else?
We got the DARPA dogs, the robots.
Yeah, we have people like Elon Musk wanting to discover a way to upload your consciousness to a computer. It's all here.
But he's cool. He's the cool one. He's the cool billionaire.
I don't find him cool.
And you got to remember, Elon Musk himself made a quote that AI will be like the death of humanity, and then he's the one who opened the company to start working on AI.
Jesus.
But you can trust him. He's going to fix it from within, just like the Democrats do.
Well, you got to remember also, think about, everybody forgets about what happened in Saudi Arabia with the whole that AI robot.
Yep.
They made
I
an
was just
AI
thinking of
robot a
Sophia.
citizen, and it's been just sitting there retrieving information and learning and growing and growing and growing. That's the first one, well, that we know of. As they start to put more and more of these AI systems, we're going to start to see realities more like the movie Surrogates with Bruce Willis.
Move over, Sophia, because we got Grace coming in.
Oh yeah,
Grace is
Sophia,
gonna
these
take
AI
job.
girlfriends. The movie Her is becoming reality. It's getting crazy out there. There's more information comes out about this, guys. You know, we'll fill you in here on Frank Analysis.
Could I share something with you, Franco?
Yeah.
Because I think we could look at it. It'd be fun.
Yeah, share it and then I'll put it up.
Grace, the robot nurse, she's going to take all of the jobs away from the people who don't want to do their jobs, because we're not going to say why, but they don't want to do them anymore.
Man. This is some
So I
scary
sent
stuff.
that.
Oh, where did you send it? In the private chat?
I don't know if he's, yeah, private, yeah.
Okay. Let me copy this.
I don't know if you saw the whole thing, but that's like 3 minutes. This is very dystopian. Warning.
Jeez. Hang on a second. Let me share.
I've seen this movie before. It didn't end well.
Yeah. A robot designed to help the elderly and those isolated by the COVID-19 pandemic. It is a sister robot to the celebrity humanoid Sophia. They are both created by Hong Kong-based Hanson Robotics. He's saying hi to Grace. Thank you, Sophia. And then the audience can't hear this right now because I don't have the audio attached to it, but they're putting this like goofy music and to make us feel like, oh, like this is like cute, what we're dealing with here.
Mm-hmm.
They do that in all these videos, like WEF, World Economic Forum, does that a lot.
Help healthcare providers assess their health. Entertaining old people, making sure they're okay. Why not get a real person to do that?
Because COVID is too dangerous. We can't have them there.
Oh my god. And then this guy's excited about it here, CEO and founder of
getting money.
What is it?
He's getting so much
Hanson
profit.
Robotics. Jeez. How does it have 10K likes?
Well, you got to remember the reason why it has 10K likes and things like that is the same way where we'll do a video. It will be delayed, like our likes and views will be delayed hours. Like sometimes I've seen times where we just finished. It says finished 4 hours ago. Then there's times where it'll be like 24 hours later, and it's like a 12-hour lag on the amount of views. And it's because they can play around with those algorithms. And it, as I call her, Susie Chewbacca, as Susie Chewbacca likes to partner up with all of these different business interests, then that's what they're going to do, make things work out better for their people in their side. And I'm pretty sure all of this is completely on the corporate algorithm, which is pumped to all of the major tech titans and stock barons, the people who love this kind of stuff. That's the reason why I sent 1,000 likes. And only people like us who go and dig and search for this information, we're the only ones that see it and dislike it. So that's the secret to how they keep the likes up on these things. It goes to the Elon Musks. It goes to, the Michael Dell. It goes to these types of people. It doesn't get recommended to us.
Well, guys, make sure you go ahead and dislike that video. So we're gonna move on to Rockfin and talk some Rona stuff, stuff that I can't talk about here because then my channel will
Yay,
get
my
yanked.
face.
So I'll see you guys over there. I'm about to end the stream here on YouTube.
Thank
Just a
you.
second here.
Come
And-
join us.
Yeah, and if you haven't made an account yet on Rockfin, I don't know what you're waiting for.
Mhm.
I'll give you
I
guys a
love
signal
YouTube.
when we're safe.
I say I made one specifically so I could watch Franco on Rockman.